Skinflick, a Dave Brandstetter mystery, Book 5. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media. Narrator, Eric Aust. In memory of Dr. Dreadful, who left too soon. Chapter 1. He parked in sun glare on a steep, narrow street, whose cracked white cement was seamed with tar. The tar glistened and looked runny. He sat a minute longer in the icy draft from the dashboard vents. They'd been blowing since he got into the car 20 minutes ago. But the back of his shirt was soaked with sweat, and it was only 10 in the morning. Los Angeles didn't get like this often, and he hated it when it did, and this time it was holding on. It had been brutal at the cemetery 3 weeks ago. His father's 9 widows had looked ready to drop. The savage light had leached the color from the flowers. The savage heat had got at the mound of earth from the grave, even under its staring green blanket of fake grass. He'd stayed to watch the workmen fill the grave. The earth was dry. Even the sharp walls of the grave were dry. What the hell was he doing remembering that? He switched off the engine, grabbed his jacket, got out of the car. The door fell shut behind him. In the oven air, he flapped into the jacket. He crossed the street. The house stared at him, blind and sunstruck, over oleanders. The curtains were drawn. The garage doors were down. The lots were hard to build on here. House, front, and garage front were only a step back from the street. On the short up-tilt of driveway in front of the garage doors, the tape the police had put down to mark where the dead body had lain had been pulled up. But adhesive from the tape had stayed on the cement, and summer dust and street grit had stuck to it and renewed the outlining grime. Tire tracks crossed it, but there were no other stains. Gerald Ross Dawson hadn't bled. He'd died of a broken neck. Cypresses crowded the front door, cobwebby, untrimmed. He groped behind them till his fingers found a bell push. He pressed it, and inside, quiet chimes went off. Dave knew the 4 notes. Sometime in his early teens, without quite understanding why, he had dogged the steps of a handsome boy, addicted to Pentecostal meetings. The Dawson doorbell chimes picked out the start of a gospel course. Love lifted me. No one came to the door. He let the second hand go around the face of his watch once and pushed the button again. Again the notes played, and again no one came. He tilted his head. Did he smell smoke? A path went along the front of the house, cement flagstones, the moss on them gone, yellow and brittle in the heat. Arm raised to fend off overgrown oleanders. He followed the path. At the house corner, it turned into cement steps with ivy creeping across them. He climbed the steps, sure now that he did smell smoke. At the top of the steps, in a patio, where azaleas grew in tubs and where redwood furniture held dead leaves, a dark, stocky boy of around 18 was burning magazines in a brick barbecue. He wore Levi's, and that was all. The iron grill was off the pit and leaned at the boy's bare feet. He acted impatient, jabbing with an iron poker at the glossy pages, blackening and curling in flames. The daylight made almost invisible. He was half turned away from Dave. He was a furry kid. Fur on his arms, even on his feet. A magazine was in his hand. He kept starting to toss it into the pit, and then drawing it back. He wiped sweat off his face with his arm, and Dave saw the title of the magazine, Frisco Nymphets. The color photo was of 3 little girls, aged maybe 10, without any clothes on. The boy poked savagely at the flames, making a small sound that reached Dave like whimpering. The boy flapped the magazine in a kind of frantic indecision, then dropped it into the flames. Dave could feel their heat from here. He didn't want to go closer, but he did. "Good morning," he said. The boy whirled, mouth open, eyes wide. The poker fell out of his hand and clattered on the charred brick edge of the pit. Without taking his scared gaze from Dave, he groped out behind him to try to cover the magazines with his hands. That wasn't going to work. He backed up and sat on the magazines. One slid away off the barbecue surround onto the patio flags. 6 to 9ers. The naked female children on this one held yellow ducklings. The boy snatched it up and threw it into the fire. The flames choked out, and sour smoke billowed around them. Dave coughed, waved hands in front of his face, and backed off, jarring a thigh against a redwood table. "Come over here," he said. "What is it?" the boy gasped. "Who are you?" My name is Brandstetter." Dave handed the kid a card. "I'm an insurance investigator. It's about Gerald Ross Dawson, deceased. I came to see Mrs. Dawson." "She's not here." The boy coughed and wiped his eyes with his fingers. He frowned at the card and the smoke. His brows were thick and black, and grew straight across without a break. "She went to the funeral home. Some women came from the church. They would see my dad." "You're Gerald Dawson, Jr. then, right?" "Bucky," he said. "Nobody calls me Gerald Dawson, Jr." Were you cold?" Dave asked. "Did you run out of briquettes?" "I don't understand," Bucky said. "That's funny fuel. Where'd you get those?" I found them in..." But Bucky changed his mind about that answer. "They're mine. I'm ashamed of them. I wanted to get rid of them. That was the first chance I had." "Magazines like that cost a lot of money," Dave said. "How many were there? 10 or a dozen? That's $50, $60, maybe more. You were lucky to get that kind of allowance. Your father must have thought a lot of you." "And look how I repaid him," Bucky said. "You can only use so many Bibles," Dave said. "But shops that sell these don't cater to kids. It must have been hard to get them. Doesn't that count?" "Not now," Bucky shook his head. "I hate them." Tears were in his eyes, and not from the smoke this time. The smoke was trying to drift off. "He was so good. I'm such a sinner." Don't make too much of it," Dave said. "Everybody has to be 18 sometime." "When's your mother coming back?" Don't tell her I was doing this," Bucky said. "I only ask questions," Dave said. "The police already asked them all," Bucky said. "Why do you want to start it over again? It's too late." "Everything's too late. They haven't kept his body downtown 10 days. He turned sharply away, trying to hide that he was crying. He went back to the barbecue and poked blindly at the smoldering paper. Smoke huffed up again. He blew at it, making a wet sound because of the crying. Smell flames licked up. "They're finally going to let us give him his funeral tomorrow. Can't you just leave us alone?" "Where was he the night he was killed?" Dave asked. "I don't deserve to be called by his name," Bucky said. "He never did anything dirty in his life. Look at these. I'm always dirty. I pray and pray." He jabbed at the flaming magazines, outraged, despaired. "But I can't be clean. Look at me." He turned suddenly, fleeing out his arms. Flakes of pale ash had caught in the black wool of his chest and belly, covered with hair. Anybody could see what I am, an animal. "Jeans," Dave said. "Did he often stay out all night?" What?" The boy blinked, his arms lowered slowly. It was as if Dave had wakened him from sleepwalking. "No, never. Oh, why would he? Sometimes he was late, but that was church work. Do you know what kind? Dave said. This neighborhood, Bucky began, shredding up a magazine and wanting the shreds and throwing them hard into the flames. Isn't a fit place for Christians to live. It isn't a fit place to bring up children. Stuff goes on in that park there isn't even any name for. Have you seen those smut shops? Those pervert bars? The movies they show? Filthy. He ripped at the magazine. Filthy places. Filthy people. Burn! He yelled to the fire. Burn! Burn! He was trying to clean it up, Dave said. Bucky went guarded and sulky. I don't know. You know where he was? The police found stuff on his clothes. He'd been where there were horses. He'd made an enemy of Lon Tucker. Keyhole Bookshop, Dave said. Right. And he's got horses where he lives. In Topanga Canyon. That's why they arrested him. Don't you know anything? I read the police report, Dave said. That's why I'm here. It doesn't satisfy me. You? What difference does that make? $50,000 difference, Dave said. Under the soot that smeared his face, he turned a pasty color. You mean you could hold back his life insurance? That's to put me through college. That's to keep my mom. She can't work. She's handicapped. I don't want to hold it back, Dave said. But a couple of things are wrong, and I have to find out why. The only thing that's wrong is he's dead, Bucky said. The tears came back. How could God do that? He was God's servant. He was doing God's will. Lon Tucker was in his shop till midnight. The fur boy scoffed. The creep who works for him says anybody who'd work at a place like that, what would they care about lying? The shop hours are posted on the door, Dave said. Noon till midnight, weekdays. And if he kept those hours, then he couldn't have been home to his horses till 2 or after. Topanga's a long drive from here. What's that mean? Bucky began shredding another magazine. My mom didn't find my dad's body till she went out to get the Times in the morning. But the medical examiner says he died between 10 p.m. and midnight. I got home at midnight, Bucky said, from basketball practice at the church. He wasn't there. I would have seen him. Another wad of glossy paper went into the fire. For a second, a naked fifth grader looked seductively over a skinny shoulder at Dave, then blackened and vanished. Lieutenant Barker says the medical examiner could be wrong. Yeah, could be. Doesn't mean it is, Dave said. He got home, got out of the car to unlock the garage, and Lon Tucker jumped him, Bucky said. The stuff from the horses rubbed off Tucker onto him. Nifty, Dave said. Did you hear the struggle? Where do you sleep? Bucky jerked his head at corner windows. There. I didn't hear anything. I was tired. I slept hard. He ripped at another set of pages. Anyway, what kind of struggle do you think there was? And Tucker got him from behind and snapped his neck. You learn how to do that in the Marines. Tucker was a Marine in World War II. It looks easy in the movies, Dave said. It happened, Bucky said. Tucker would have to be 55, Dave said. Your father was 10 years younger. He didn't know anything about fighting, Bucky said. He poked at the burnt paper, and big loose fragments sailed up through the heat like sick bats. They settled up above on the ivy-covered slope. He was a Christian. Not a soldier of the Lord, Dave said. Are you laughing at him? Bucky turned with the poker in his hand. What are you, an atheist? Or a Jew? Or something? Is that why you don't want my mom and me to have his insurance money? Because we're born again? If he was trying to open the garage door, Dave said. Where were his keys? They weren't in his pocket. They weren't on the ground. Tucker must have taken them, Bucky said. He was searched, Dave said. So was the shop. His home. His car. They didn't find those keys. Bucky shrugged and turned back to jab at the fire. Tucker threw them away someplace. What good would they be to him? Exactly, Dave said. So why take them at all? Why don't you get off my case? Bucky said. Don't you think we've got enough trouble, my mom and me, without you coming around? And down on the street, a car door slammed. The poker clinked again. Bucky turned pasty again. He stared alarmed at Dave. There's my mom now. Oh, look. Listen, don't tell her about the magazines, please. Maybe you should quit for now, Dave said. Put them away. Wait for another chance. If you don't say anything, Bucky retrieved the poker, it'll be okay. She won't come up here. It's too hard. Then I'll go down there, Dave said. The smoke hung caustic in the slanting street. No wind stirred to take it away. It kept crawling down the hillside. It lodged in the shrubbery. A tall, wide-hipped woman came out of the garage where a tan aspen showed. And I found it, bumper sticker. The woman dragged her right foot. A cane hung over her arm. She wore a new tan double-knit pantsuit over a new cocoa-color synthetic shirt. She'd had her hair done. It was iron gray. Effortfully, she stretched up for the garage door and dragged it down, clumsily shifting aside just in time for it to miss her. She turned toward Dave and stopped. An eyelid drooped. So did the corner of her mouth, but she got her words out sharply. Who are you? What do you want? He went to her, spoke his name, handed her his card. When a policyholder dies by misadventure, we investigate. Where's my son? She looked up. What's that, smoke? He's burning trash, Dave said. I've talked to him. He's only a child, she said. You had no right. I'm not a police officer, Dave said. What'd you talk to him about? What did he say? That he thinks Von Tucker killed his father, Dave said. Across the street, window fastening snapped. French doors opened beyond shaggy tree tops. Maybe it would be better if we talked inside. There's nothing to talk about, she said. The police have arrested the man. I guess that means the district attorney must have been satisfied. He was the right one. Why is it unusual that Bucky should think so? It's not unusual, Dave said. She had to be close to 60. It wasn't just that a stroke had left her half paralyzed. Flesh sagged loose beneath her jaw. Her skin was a web of wrinkles. There were liver spots on her hands. Gerald Dawson had married a woman almost old enough to be his mother. Bucky had been a last-chance baby. He said, but it's too easy. She gave her head a shake that made the loose lip quiver. There's nothing easy about it. Everything about it is hard. Death is hard. Loss is hard. Even for Christians, Mr. She glanced at the card. Brandstetter. God sends these things to test us. But knowing that doesn't make the test any easier to bear. She narrowed the eye, whose lid she could control. What are you doing here? You haven't brought a check from the insurance company. Have you brought another test? Where was he that night, Mrs. Dawson? On the Lord's business, she said. I don't know the particulars. Who would know? Someone at the church? She started toward the door, using the cane, dragging the foot. They've already said not. Maybe Reverend Chamante. Keys rattled in her free hand. She clutched at a cypress to haul herself up the short doorstep. She poked the key at the door. It seems very hard that he should have been killed going about his father's business. Dave said, at the bank, his statements show he wrote a couple of large checks lately. Do you know why? Are his canceled checks here? At his office, she said. The girl there paid all the bills. It was simpler. The door swung inward. There was a breath of lemon-scented furniture polish. Dave asked, why did he have birth control pills in his pocket? She stopped moving, hand on the door latch. Slowly, painfully, she turned. She twisted her mouth in a wince of disbelief. What? What'd you say? Among the items the police found in your husband's pockets, wallet, credit cards, the usual, was an envelope from a pharmacy on the Sunset Strip. And in the envelope was a folder of birth control pills. The prescription was written to Mrs. Gerald Dawson. Would that be right? The Sunset Strip. It was only 6 or 8 miles west, across town. But she said it blankly, the way she might name some place in Afghanistan. Then she didn't say anything more. She simply kept her gaze on Dave's face. She seemed stunned. He said, the doctor's name is Incy. Is he your doctor? Her face twitched. What? Incy? Then suddenly answers chattered out of her. Dr. Incy, she nodded. Yes, of course, he's my doctor. That's right. The pills. She said, yes, of course, Gerald promised to pick them up. I'd forgotten. And all the terrible things that happened, I'd forgotten about the pills. I can understand that, Dave said. I have a headache, she said. It's a stressful heat. Excuse me. And the living half of her dragged the dead half inside and shut the door. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.